Picture this. You're 2 weeks into a sprint. Everything's going smoothly. The UI looks great. The business logic is solid. Tests are passing. And then you try to integrate with a third-party API. And suddenly you discover that their rate limits are 10 times stricter than their documentation states, or a field that you were depending on has been deprecated and removed. Your entire approach needs to change, and just this morning you were reporting that you were ahead of schedule. What if I told you there's a simple principle that could have prevented this scenario entirely? I heard this story roughly 2 decades ago when I was early in my software engineering career, and it's stuck with me ever since. Back in the mid-90s, a team of developers were working at a video game studio called SingleTrack. You've probably never heard of them, but if you're as old as I am, you might remember titles like their critically acclaimed series Twisted Metal. Anyway, they were a month into a 10-month deadline to deliver 2 games for the original PlayStation, when their financial controller decided to pop by and see how they were getting on. "It's a black triangle," she said sarcastically. Yep, 10% of their project timeline had been consumed by rendering a single black triangle on the screen. Even back in the 90s, something that simple was like a day's work tops. But to the development team, this represented a massive breakthrough. Why? Because that triangle meant that their entire pipeline was working. In their own words, it had passed through new modeling tools through 2 different intermediate converter programs, had been loaded up as a complete database, and rendered through a fairly complex scene hierarchy, fully textured and lit. Though there were no lights, hence why the triangle came out looking black. The hardest, riskiest part was done. That same day, they had complete models on the screen, and within a week, they had an environment to move a model through. They went on to refer to these kinds of accomplishments as black triangles, things that take a lot of effort with little to demonstrate for it. And what I personally took away is prioritizing tackling the riskiest, most uncertain element of your work first, even when it seems like the smallest or least impressive deliverable. Heck, it might not even be a deliverable. It could just be a stepping stone towards one. Let me give you some concrete examples. For web development, before building your entire e-commerce checkout UI, considering how you might keep the code maintainable with state machines, blah, 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 first just prove you can successfully authorize a card payment with your payment processor. For backend systems, before building your production-scale data transformation pipeline, verify that you can successfully authenticate and communicate with that critical external API. All it might take is a few curl requests to confirm that it works as expected and as documented. For AI integration, before building your whole AI-powered feature, validate that you can get a meaningful response from your chosen LLM API within your latency and cost constraints, just by manually submitting some prompts. There are 3 key reasons why this works. Firstly, risk reduction. You discover the hard problems while you still have time and flexibility to solve them. You can deal with roadblocks more calmly rather than reactively when you're under deadline pressure. Second, team morale. Getting that early proof of concept win gives your team confidence and momentum. I've nothing to back this up, but I do think there's something psychologically powerful about proving a tricky concept works. And thirdly, stakeholder communication. When you hit a roadblock early, it's much easier to have an honest conversation with leadership about scope, timeline, or approach adjustments. There's just one challenge. How do you identify what your black triangle should be? So here are some questions that I ask. What assumption are we making that could completely derail this project? What external dependency do we have the least control over? What part of this work have we never done before? If we had to demo something to prove this is possible, what would it be? It's very easy to slip into cracking on with the parts that you're most used to. The key is thinking outside of your comfort zone. If you're a back-end engineer, your black triangle might actually be the front-end integration piece. If you're great at CRUD operations, it might be the real-time WebSocket connection. You need to resist and challenge saying, oh, but we'll just use this library for that. That kind of thinking is full of assumptions. So once you've identified your black triangle, how do you tackle it? Here are a few approaches that have worked well for me. Firstly, mob programming. Get your whole team around the problem. Yes, it might seem like you're wasting resources having 5 people work on the one task, but you're preventing 5 people from context switching later down the line when things could go wrong. Secondly, time box spikes. Give yourself a fixed amount of time, maybe half a day, to prove or disprove the approach. If it's not achievable within the allotted time, you might need to have some serious discussions and reevaluate the whole task, or maybe even the whole sprint. Just be sure to set a clear success criteria beforehand. And finally, prototype first development. Build the simplest possible version that proves the concept and then iterate from there. The key is to resist the urge to polish. Your black triangle doesn't need to be production ready. Don't turn it into like a golden triangle when it was meant to be a proof of concept. I've seen teams struggle with this approach in a couple of ways. Firstly, scope creep. They think, while we're proving the API integration works, let's add error handling and retries and logging. No. Prove it works first. Analysis paralysis is the other problem. Spending more time identifying the black triangle than it would take to just build something. Remember, the goal isn't to build the final solution, it's to prove the risky assumption right or wrong as quickly as possible. In my previous company, I encouraged this approach and saw a measurable decrease in late-stage project pivots and a significant improvement in delivery predictability. But more importantly, we created a calm environment for our engineers. The most successful projects weren't the ones with the most impressive demos early on. They were the ones that tackled their scariest problems first. So here's my challenge for you. In your next sprint or iteration, identify your black triangle. What's the one thing that if it doesn't work, changes everything else? Build that first. Prove it works, and then build everything else on top of that knowledge. I'd love to hear about your experiences. What's the worst roadblock you've had late into a project? And how do you think it could have been avoided? And if you found this useful, subscribe for more practical engineering leadership content. And until next time, prioritize your risks, not your comfort zone.